Environmental Defence Fund and CNBC-TV18 present Climate Tech Convening India 2025 in association with Climate Collective.
So while we've had many conversations regarding climate change, is there enough action that has been taken? To discuss this and the use of art and cinema to drive climate change, let me go across to my panelists, Rahul and Nandita. Welcome again. Rahul, let me start with you. Your journey as an eco-warrior started off sort of in 2009 when, in a first for any Indian, you were invited by the Climate Action Network to Canada to raise awareness in the lead up to Copenhagen. And since then, there's been no looking back. Over the years, Rahul, what kind of an impact, what kind of an action have you seen that has taken place? And not just conversations.
There's a two-word answer for this: not much.
Not much.
That's the sorry truth about climate change. It's political. We can use wooden toothbrushes, and that's fine. And we can use cloth bags, and that's fine. But if you really want to make a difference, it has to be political. And this world has gone 2 steps forward and 3 steps back and 1 step sideways and 1 step the other way in the last 15 years. Ever since I was one of the opening speakers at COP15 in Copenhagen. And there was so much of hope in the air, and then it's almost as if Groundhog Day. Every single COP you go to, it starts with this excitement, and climatologists from all over the world are furiously debating, rising seawater levels and,
yes,
surface sea temperatures, and someone's talking about the South Sea Islands, and someone's talking, and at the end of the time, of those 3 days or 4 days, it's back because the big boys in the room have said, no, we don't believe this is a problem, or, yes, it's a problem, but let's kick the ball a little bit further down the road. We promise to do something at next COP. So truly, I mean, whether it's methane, whether it's greenhouse gases, whether it's fossil fuels, the really big, pardon the pun, burning questions, have they been confronted as yet? Has anyone actually done anything substantial and massive? And at this point, I just want to say, we did it for cancer.
Yes.
People don't smoke. We did it for AIDS. The world was talking about the dreaded disease. We have managed to have global conversations sustained over decades. Fats, saturated fats. In the 50s when the sugar lobby and the fat lobby in America were trying to, get the government not to talk about this versus that, the sugar lobby won. And it was fats that everybody today talks about. So you can successfully have a global conversation over decades,
yes,
on an issue. But it hasn't happened with climate change. And of course, those reasons are not political. That's another reason altogether, but I'll get to that when you ask that question.
Yes, Rahul, we'll delve deeper into that in just a bit, but coming across to Nandita. Nandita, similar question to you. In your view, you've been advocating environmental awareness for over a decade now. Have things changed? Have things progressed?
I think it's very difficult to answer that because a lot of it is so intangible. Actually, most of it is so intangible that how do you measure it? And it's all about behavior change. It's all about that shift in the individual and collectively are we really looking at it as an urgent issue. I don't think there is that sense of urgency. It's too amorphous, it's too large, it's too overwhelming. It's not my life, you can't humanize it. And I think that's where cinema, arts, that's where hopefully one can kind of give it a name, give it a form, humanize, making, like what do you empathize about? How do you realize it's a big problem till you don't sort of distill it into human lives or into lives, not just human, but all kinds of lives. So I think that's why that's a challenge. I'm sure there are good people doing amazing work on
yes,
the ground. They may not be as known, they may not be big, they may not be able to scale. So it's a bit of a catch-22 because nobody's shedding light on them. There aren't all these celebrities and all of that or media shedding light on them. So they are doing their great work. but it's not being scaled. They're not probably being able to come to St. Regis to be able to talk about it. So I'm sure good work is happening. I want to sound more optimistic, but it's true. We take 2 steps forward and 2 steps backwards, as Rahul was mentioning. So I feel the problem here is that sense of urgency is just not there. And you talked about whether it's cancer, AIDS, because you see somebody suffering. You know, you can feel it, you can see it, there's someone in the family. Now, every family pretty much can tell you there's someone who's suffering from cancer.
Yes.
But, you know, we don't realize if the air quality, Delhi air quality is really bad. So there are food problems, there's air quality problems. So, you know, I think that sense of urgency is lacking, and how do we bring that as a center stage is really the question.
Again, we've not made it urgent like we've been discussing. So where do we stand today, and how do we go to that next step?
I'm telling you, it's political. I'm not joking. You can keep asking people not to burst crackers on Diwali, but that's not going to solve it.
Unless stringent.
There has to be massive political action to be taken, and it then goes down to military-industrial complexes of some nations. It goes down to political compulsions of other nations. It goes down to geopolitical and geographical compulsions of certain nations. And that's where it's at. The reason why this issue, and awareness of this issue is 100%. Everybody knows about global warming. They might not even understand that it's not just the heating up of the planet, but about unpredictable climate events. But everybody knows that something is wrong, either in their ecosphere or in the neighboring ecosphere. Why is anybody not doing anything about it? Because they truly believe that they can't. That this is a policy, invisible thing that somebody else has to do. And it is. It's true. Somebody else has to do that.
And it's mostly going to affect the future generations. It's not...
So the quality of empathy that Nandita was talking about with cancer, I saw my mother pass away, or you saw a close relative pass away, and you go, my God, if I can stop this, I would love to. But with climate change, post this generation, then people will say, you know what, my father, he died because he couldn't breathe in Delhi. It could happen. But this generation still hasn't had those cataclysmic individual personal events that climate change, you can actually say, she suffered because of climate change. Or my child could not breathe because of climate change. So never wish it on anybody, never wish it on any society or any epoch. But if that's what it takes, then it's still a while away. It's only when you couldn't see the building next to you in New Delhi or even in Mumbai in the winter that you began to say, oh God, this is something real. This is not something theoretical or something that's happening somewhere else. So that quality of empathy you're asking for a generation that is yet to come. It's a mirror up to human beings and the human condition to show that we are finding it so difficult to empathize for those we cannot see today.
Absolutely. We need to, like you said, make massive political policy choices, make everybody understand that climate change is real and it's directly or indirectly affecting everyone, be it your health, your jobs, your livelihood, everything. It directly or indirectly affects that. Nandita, coming to you, in your experience, how can creative industries such as films, theater, visual arts contribute to driving conversations around sustainability and environmental innovations? Any particular film projects that you've been involved with and have highlighted these themes?
While I agree with Rahul about everything is political, I also feel that, sometimes we absolve our responsibilities if we just put all the blame on politicians or politics. It's important, and that's true for many different issues, not just climate change. So I think all of us have a responsibility, and that's why as artists, as filmmakers, as teachers, as parents, whatever role we are in, I just think there's overconsumption. Like, I think just by being mindful consumers, even if it's a little shift, we may never see that change in our lifetime. But the fact that we are at least contributing, that's why Gandhiji's quote, even though it's very cliched, it really rings true, I think, be the change you want to see in the world. Otherwise, you keep absolving yourself and say, okay, you know, those guys have to do it. And while they have to, and the way they can scale it, we can't. But it doesn't mean that we can't do anything. Because otherwise, we are reduced. We anyway feel so disempowered. We anyway feel that what difference is it going to make whether I use a cloth bag or whether I, you know, use plastic or whether I use an air conditioner or not. I mean, 10 years ago, what we thought was luxury has become a necessity today. Because we keep pushing our boundaries. We keep pushing that and saying, no, but now I really need it. I have a 14-year-old child, and you know, a lot of your own values get tested when you have a child and you're trying to teach. And we often talk about what's a need and what's a want. And he's, for instance, now in a school where that doesn't have air conditions at all. You know, where they measure how much food you waste. There's a bucket kept, and you're supposed to throw all the leftover food, and they actually measure. They measure how much electricity each dormitory actually uses. These are small ways. But imagine if children were just made to be aware right from that age. Maybe there would be a shift. So as filmmakers, as artists, what can we do in our own little sphere? I know it's a drop in the ocean, but as they say, every drop counts. You know, how you create your own production company, the kind of material that you use, the kind of stories that you tell. Even when you tell human stories, I mean, while we think of this as climate issue and that's as human rights issue, this is a social justice, this is health, they are not so segregated issues in silos. And we are not here to compete whether one issue is more important than the other. If it impacts you, then, you know, that's an important issue for you. Somebody could have died of malaria, and that's the most important issue for that person, and I'm not going to question that. But all these issues are also connected. If you're talking of displacement and migration, it's connected to climate. Today, it's hard enough for the kind of films that I make. It's really difficult. Everyone says, oh, it's really good to have all these social issues, and we need to plug them. We need to be, you know, we need to tell better stories. But who's funding them?
Yes.
What are the films that are making 500 crores or are being made in 500 crores and are making even more? So I think we are all complicit in keeping it as status quo and not really changing and not really re-evaluating or really doing some soul searching as to how each one of us can really live differently. So I think living authentically and mindfully, consciously is something that we all can do. So that's a responsibility we can't absolve ourselves of.
Absolutely, and great insights there, Nandita. But Rahul, you know, again, getting back to the point, how can we get more young people to join in? Because, again, they are the next generations are the ones that are going to be suffering the most from this crisis if we do not address this now. The role of social media in kind of getting the youth together and, you know, taking charge and inspiring action. How do we do that?
You have to make it easy, you have to make it relatable, you have to make it urgent. Three things that anybody will respond to, forget the youth. The ice bucket challenge for ALS. Suddenly everybody was doing it. That was one, easy. It was weird, and it was kind of attention grabbing. So I think, let me give you an example. How many restaurants do we have in Bombay? Come on, let's do this quickly. 1,000? 10,000. 10,000 restaurants. How many covers in each restaurant? 50? An Udupi restaurant, 50? How many times do you have people coming in? Twice a day? 100 people coming into a restaurant? Does anybody have a calculator? 10,000 into 100? That's 10 lakhs. So 10 lakh people are eating in restaurants in Bombay every day, right? Everywhere you go, whether it's an Udupi restaurant or whether you go to a 5-star hotel, you get a glass of water poured for free. It's 200 milliliters of water, purified by the municipal corporation, that's gone through the entire cycle of purification and comes to your table. Free. 200 milliliters into 10 lakh. So divide 10 lakh by 5, and you'll get 2 lakh milliliters, 2 lakh liters of water every single day is being poured into glasses. How many people drink the whole glass? 50%?
Not even that.
50%.
Right? Okay.
So you're wasting 1 lakh liters, 100,000 liters of purified water every day in the city, and all you have to do is this. When the guy comes to pour water, all you have to do is this. You just cover your glass. And you save a lakh of liters of water, purified water.
That's true of so many things, right?
Now that's something that can just catch fire. Anybody can do it. So you just have a campaign where you're doing this. Not too high, just this.
So absolutely on those points, waste less, empathize more, consume less. Thank you so much, both of you, for such invaluable insights. Apart from being a content creator, apart from being an actor, now an author, you're also a global voice for climate action. You're the first United Nations Development Program India Youth Climate Champion. So first, tell us, how did the journey as a climate warrior, as a champion begun? And, how did it all begin? And what made you or what inspired you to dive into the urgency of climate action?
How my journey started, I'll be very honest with you. I started working as a creator in the Feb of 2015. Next month, it'll be 10 years that I've been creating content online. When I did start creating content, it was comedy. That was my main vehicle of creation. Eventually, I did start having conversations with my audience around body positivity and mental health and girls' education. Climate action was a fairly newer conversation, and that actually happened because of the UNDP. They reached out to me in about 3 years ago, saying that they would like to collaborate with me on a few projects and kind of start working together and see what we can do together. And at that time, I remember thinking, how can I be of use in this role, since honest to God, I had not done any work in climate before that. But that slowly, when I did start working with them, I realized that the one thing that I could help with is amplification of content in general. I have a platform that has impact, that has reach. I have a relationship with my audience where I don't talk to them, but they speak to me as well. We have very, very constant and very engaging conversations on my platforms very often. So which is where I see my place in this fight against climate change, where I like to be in rooms like this, meet with people who are making changes happen, take these lessons, break them down into smaller content pieces, and then disseminate them so that it's easier for the younger audience to understand what they can do in this fight. Because I feel very fortunate that we come from a country where a huge chunk of the young audience actually wants to make a difference. The problem is they don't know how to do it. Because a lot of times the conversations around climate action involve a lot of maps and graphs and statistics and numbers and color-coded, things that become very difficult to translate. They also become overwhelming as a young person to try to understand. Because the minute it becomes so official and so complicated, the first thought is, oh, maybe the MNCs will take care of it. Or maybe the NGOs will take care of it. Maybe the government's going to take care of it. Like, how can I help sitting at home while I scroll through my phone? So I think that's where I come in, where I like to take this information, break it down, and try to use simpler storytelling to make sure that content like this gets consumed easily.
Absolutely. And, you represented India at Climate Week 2024 in New York City as well, where you shared your vision for a youth-led climate movement. And that's where, like you said, that's your USP. So tell us, how are you empowering the younger generation? How are you using your platforms to amplify impact? How are you doing that? Give us an example.
I remember meeting a lot of dignitaries, meeting a lot of people who are doing beautiful work in climate action. I remember speaking to Dia very closely, because her and I, we both work with the UNDP. And literally just those conversations cut down into 90-second clips have gotten me engagement on that I'd been trying to get on climate conversations for much longer before that. So I think collaborations is a huge, huge step forward towards this. It also adds credibility to the conversation the minute you have someone who's been doing work around what they're doing. And just, I think similar to what I said before this, just kind of breaking it down, making sure, I know I see a lot of people who are very important in this room. If you are in places of authority, please make sure that if there's any kind of communication that goes through you that you need to reach the younger people, that you don't use a lot of big words, that you don't use a lot of, I've been working, when I started working in climate 3 years ago, it's embarrassing, but I had to go and actually Google what carbon footprint exactly is. There are the number of people that I meet today that ask me, okay, Prajakta, you keep talking about SDGs. What are the SDGs? I think just the terminology, if we could just start breaking that down, I think that's where we could make a huge difference.
All right, and like you mentioned, that data and statistics are overwhelming. While they are important, they don't always inspire action. How can we better connect the dots between the numbers and the emotional side of climate tech? And you do that beautifully through your stories. Give us an example. How do you bring out the human side of it?
I think just call to actions are huge with a lot of younger people. I think one of the things that I end up learning every time I meet them and have conversations about this is that, Prajakta, we love that video, but what can we do? Like, so anytime there is any kind of problem that you, that we do end up showing that our planet is facing, I think what can be an easy to start solution could be a great conversation there. I remember when I started talking about climate action, one of the things, it's a very, very silly example, but it kind of worked, and I didn't expect it to work the way that it did. When I for years now, I mean, I grew up in a house where we've always had a compost pit, where we never used single-use plastics, where we were very careful about the electricity and the water consumption and stuff like that. My parents taught me about waste segregation when we were growing up in the house. So when I started creating content around this, I've always had a sippy cup, so that I don't have to have plastic bottles everywhere I go. One of the fan clubs actually picked up that and made a Instagram handle of the sippy cup.
Okay.
And then that made a lot more people buy sippy cups and talk about it. Now, it's a very, very simple case study. I didn't think this would even qualify to make it to the rooms.
No, but the kind of impact it had.
But it did make a change. When I meet people, they're like, oh, look at that, I've got my sippy also because you have a sippy. So it's as simple as that. I think the minute you can simplify conversations for the younger people to understand what they can do in this, I think it's efficient.
Clearly, small changes can make big differences. Right, but on that optimistic note, we'll have to wrap up our conversation. Prajakta Koli, many thanks for being so candid, and thank you for your brilliant insight.
Environmental Defence Fund and CNBC-TV18 present Climate Tech Convening India 2025 in association with Climate Collective.